Welcome back, wordsmiths and story seekers. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks, broadcasting from the shadowy halls of Devil's Rock Publishing HQ. And tonight I am thrilled to share the writer's chair with the incomparable JD Parker. JD is a writer who struggles with the idea of calling himself one. He has a BA Hons in media production from the University of Lincoln and now works in digital forensics. He currently resides in Birmingham, England, with his 2 cats and 1 wife. He will likely end up with more pets, but is perfectly satisfied with his current number of wives. Ignis Sacer is his debut novel, not his first, and that distinction is important. JD, Jonny, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. Now, I haven't prepared you for this, and this is going to be fun because my recording style tends to be quite off the cuff, and we'll see how this goes. But a couple of things, a little bit of housekeeping just before we jump into the questions. Number one, it's very, very hot in this room. So if I start sweating in the show, that's why, and I may be pouring at my forehead. Number two, this is the first podcast recording interview I've done in quite a while, so it should be fine, but just to pre-warn listeners, I'm a little rusty. Number three, Jonny is a personal friend as well as an incredible author, and part of the reason I have him on the show is, number one, because he has been a big influence on my writing life, and he does not know that, but having seen Jonny write and do films and do media and just be awesome at all the things he does has definitely been a bit of a launch platform for me having the confidence that I do as a writer. And also, we go back to the days of parkour. So for people who have followed me for a long, long time, who have heard my stories about parkour, Jonny's one of those weird jumping kangaroo men. So, Jonny, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. There's a lot to take in there. If you'd like me to sort of address a couple of those points, if I start sweating during the interview, it's because your questions are too tough.
Okay, gotcha.
And no, you're absolutely right that I didn't know that I influence your writing at all. I know for a fact that you influence mine, but
that's what I was angling for. No, I'm only joking. But yeah, welcome to the show. So, Ignis Sacer is your first book. Tell us a little bit about your writing journey and how you got to the point in which you have officially now published your first book.
Okay, gosh. My writing journey started long, long ago. I'm just making it sound like a story in itself there.
In a galaxy far, far away.
No, so I guess you could split my writing journey into before deciding to do books and after. I'd given plenty of tries at writing film scripts.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where my sort of love of writing sort of originally was born. Now, I do think there was a sort of inherent safety in writing film scripts, knowing that I would never or likely never get them made. Because there's this idea that, you'd need an entire crew to help bring your vision to life. So there's this safety of going, I can write whatever I'd like in this space. And it's fine because no one's ever actually going to see it because it's never actually going to be turned into a film. And it was maybe 10 years ago now that I decided, look, if you want to make writing a serious part of your life, then you're going to need to write something that gets released and actually, potentially read by people. And I thought the best avenue for that was novels. So I set about writing my first novel, the likes of which very few people on this planet have read. You, of course, being one of them.
Yep.
And this is going back to what you discussed, the difference between first and debut being an important distinction.
Mm-hmm.
I did write an entire book. I really enjoyed the journey of writing it. The end product, I'm really proud to have written, but again, I often compare it to the first pancake. You're often going to mess it up. You can enjoy it yourself, but you're not going to serve it to your friends and family. This book, Ignis Sacer, this is the second pancake, the one that I flipped. It didn't get totally ruined, and now I'm very much happy to be sharing it with yourself, friends, family, and anyone who wants to read it.
Yeah, and it's quite the book as well, and we'll get on to that, but I kind of want to go into a little bit more this kind of distinction between the first novel and the debut novel, because we both know through personal experience, and lots of people listening to the show will likely know, writing is hard. And obviously you said there about sort of that distinction of, deciding to write something to be read versus kind of the scripts that you were doing. And you wrote an entire book and you went through that journey of the first novel, which is arguably something that I found in people the biggest hurdle to overcome is writing that first book, like putting down that draft, getting to the end. To me, that was the most monumentous moment of my writing career. It proves that it can be done and it proves I could do it again.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't always prove or it doesn't always mean that people want to do it again. And obviously, there's a reason that you didn't publish that first book. But how did you work through that struggle of I've written a book, I'm going to put this aside, and I'm just going to start this journey all over again? Because that's quite a mindset to jump into and to start.
Yeah, it's a commitment. So when the vast majority of that first book that I wrote was during COVID. I was still going into work, but there was no work to be done, so I had to make the work for myself, and that work was getting this novel finally completed. So the idea to jump into the next book, as I'm sure many creatives will know, is not just exclusive to writing. It goes across all creative disciplines. If you're working on a project for a long time, the seeds of the next thing are being planted throughout the journey. It could be in the writing that you're doing at the moment. It could be something you watch on television, something you hear in the news. Inspiration can come from anywhere. But once that seed's planted, it's very hard to stop it from growing. And as I'm sure you know, it can be incredibly annoying when you're trying to focus on the thing at hand.
They call like sirens.
Yeah, they do. They do. And I found that I'm very good at compartmentalizing those thoughts. I'll occasionally let them in when I've got nothing really else to think about, and I'll start to develop these ideas. But I can push them aside and go, no, you're for later. Stay in your lane for now. And I just know that when I get to the point where I can give my time and attention to something else, that those ideas that I've been suppressing for so long will just flourish, and either they'll turn into something that I'm really pleased with, or I really want to explore further, or they just get cast aside. And that's exactly what's happened the past two times. So after my first book, or during the writing of my first book, I was really getting into horror as a genre for the first time in my life. I'd always been a fan, but I was really getting deep into it. And that's the sort of the moment when the idea of Ignis Sacer was first born. We can talk about like the sort of inspiration and the inception moment a bit later if you'd like. But again, I was wrapping Ignis Sacer up at the end of at the beginning of this year, and for about the last year, while going through the really grueling and very sort of creatively muted editing process, that of course my mind is begging for something creative to chew on, and that's when the seeds of the book that I'm currently writing were planted. And again, went through that whole process of like, no, you stay where you are. And now for the past few weeks I've been able to let that sort of creative side sort of explode again.
Yeah.
And I'm just really enjoying being at the start of the writing process again.
So I can hear, although they haven't even listened to this at the time that we record this, I can hear all the listeners leaning forward and going like, that sounds well and good, Jonny. How the fuck do you do that? Because I'm very, very similar in that I love an idea and I'll be rolling with an idea, and then the sirens will sing and my boat will veer off in different directions through choppy water. And I know a lot of people that initial hurdle, one of the biggest things they have to battle with is that commitment, is that staying disciplined enough to go, this is the idea. For you, where has that come from? Is it a thing that's sort of innate with you? Is it something that you've trained? Is it something you hadn't thought about?
Are you talking about where the idea comes from, or
just that resilient determination?
The resilience. Yeah. So okay,
why you got a wife and I don't?
I wasn't going to say it, but no. The resilience, as you put it. I don't start writing a project until I know that it's something that I want to at least semi-commit to. I'm not one of these that just like writes the first chapter to see if it's going to work. I do meticulous planning in my head. to the point where, well, I'm actually putting pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, to start my book, I know that I'm going to be in it for the long haul. So when it gets to the point where the next idea starts creeping in and saying, "Pay attention to me now," you know, I want to be written. I'm already deep into the process. And I tell myself each time when I compartmentalize and I push the other thoughts aside, I tell myself, if you're serious about the project that you're working on at the moment, you will not half-ass it. You will not give attention to another creative endeavor, no matter how badly you want to, until you have done this. And I'd love to say that there's sort of a secret sauce to it, but it really is just looking back on the amount of time I've committed to the project that I'm currently working on and reminding myself that this is how I once felt about this project. This spark of inspiration, I think this project I'm working on was born of a similar feeling, and you owe it the time and the respect it needs to be fulfilled. And it's, you know, I'm only I'm 2 and a bit books into my journey as a writer, but that's how it's worked so far. Things could change in the future. I could become so enamored with an idea that I immediately throw aside a book that I've been working on for a year, but I've not got there yet. And right now the process is working for me.
Perfect. And just for context for people, how long have you had that mindset where you've turned it from film scripts into books? How long have you been working on these books in total for?
So, God, that's a very good question. I was
Well,
working
from
on
the day I was born.
I mean, so the first big writing project that I finished was done while I was at uni. It was a script for a graphic novel series called Stan. Nothing to do with Eminem, I'm afraid. I know you're a fan.
I might
but
remember this briefly.
you might do. It was a story. It was basically the story of a killer robot.
Whose teeth gone cold, and you're wondering why. Sorry, go on.
Nothing to do with Eminem or Dido. So it was, but back in uni, and I wrote the entire script, and then realized Marvel had basically done the story first, and it was Ultron, which was fine. You know, this is the sort of Simpsons did it first thing is something I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Yeah,
but it's something I discovered a lot of times throughout my writer journey. It was an interesting point, actually. So the further I got into writing, the more projects I tried to write. It became later and later that the projects that I was ripping off sort of started appearing. So when I did this Killer Robot one, Ultron had been written back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I then wrote another. I started writing a film script, and then it turned out sort of a year before then, Johnny Knoxville had made a film that was very similar. I then moved on to the next project, and then the film. Do you remember the film Dope?
No.
Cool little American film about a bunch of kids who happen upon a large amount of drugs and have to sell them off very quickly in order to, you know, basically pay their way through college, I believe. And I was writing the same script, but based in England, and that film came out. I didn't
realize the thread went this far back.
Yeah, but that sort of came back. That sort of came out about 6 months before, and then you'll know. I'm not going to go too much into who and what. But the book I was working on had some. The first book that I finished had some uncanny similarities to a film that came out just after I finished the book, but hadn't released it. And part of the reason I never released it, again, it's the first book. I didn't really want to show anyone, but if I did release it, there would be a lot of questions as to, hey, bud, you've just sort of ripped off this pretty major Hollywood film.
Yeah.
And I mean, those in the know, the very few people that have read the book, know that I was, you know, writing the book long before the trailer for this film even came out. which makes it sound like I'm desperately trying to, defend my plagiarism. But it was one of those things. And then I went through the entire process of writing Ignis Sacer, fully expecting towards the end of the process that the film or the book or the video game or the comic would release, and it would be
Yeah.
uncannily similar to what I'd written. And I was fully ready for the last 4 years of my life to just be like, oh well, guess I'm copying someone again. And as far as I'm aware, it never happened. So
Well,
I
live on air, I will unveil.
But no, I think I'm finally maybe one or like a half step in front of the zeitgeist.
Interesting. The treadmills. It's like when you're on like an escalator and the handle things go slower than the actual escalator, and you're like, ugh.
Yes,
yeah.
That's exactly how it feels. So I'm really hoping now that for my sort of future endeavors, I can sort of keep that far ahead of things and go like, not at the end of the day, nothing's original, but you want it to be at least partially original. And a lot of my stories weren't meeting that bar. I thought they were original, and then I realized they'd been done elsewhere. And I guess a lot of avoiding that is just sort of the vigorous market research. And some of that market research did actually change the course of my book. There were similarities to there was a film called Black Death with Sean Bean, I believe Eddie Redmayne as well, following the Black Death, the other big, the sort of the more popular plague of the time. But there were some quite, I wouldn't say striking similarities, but sort of nagging similarities to the book I'd planned. And I just had that thought in my head and thought, like, look, no, this has been done. You can get weirder with it. And hopefully, by steering in that sort of slightly weird direction, get a little more original with it. And I'm really happy that is sort of how it turned out. The sort of strange and sort of off-piste choices that I made to differentiate it from this film really shone through, and actually ended up making the story what it was or what it is, and turned it into something I'm just really proud of.
Yeah, and you should be. And it is a fantastic book. And again, I'm not just saying that because we have that history, but I was fortunate enough to be an early reader and to give you my opinion. It's a beast of a book. I'll say that. So, like, for people who are fans of fantasy, for people who like their dark stuff, for people who like their kind of historical overtures as well, there's kind of a lot thrown into this book. So tell me, you wrote the first novel that you wrote, which was unpublished. How many words roughly was that? How many pages was that? Do you remember?
That was somewhere in the region of about 62,000 words. Yeah.
And then this one, if I remember right, is 160-ish thousand?
164,000, I believe.
164,000. So obviously, bigger. Like, we can joke about size and all that kind of stuff, but like on a really sort of real note, going from writing a novel that is about 60,000 words, which is, for people unfamiliar, probably about 300-ish pages, kind of like your standard novel, to writing something so big, there are so many things you have to carry forward. You've got a lot of burden in the story to take from that beginning to keep interest weaving all the way through to the end. It's not a spoiler, I hope, just to say there are multiple plot lines. There are, different characters, POVs, which I think work really well to tell this sort of bigger story. But how did you tackle going from something smaller to something of this length? Because it's a challenge, man. Like, I personally, I know this struggle.
Yeah, totally. I'm a product of my influences. It's really a result of the books that I tend to read. I'm a big fan of the likes of Brandon Sanderson. So to put it into context, you're calling my beast of a book 64,000 words. It's very, very nice of you. And given the genre, certainly horror, it's quite long. It's quite long for a horror book. Certainly nowhere near the longest, but probably longer than your typical. The last Brandon Sanderson book I read is the longest book I've ever read, and is 490,000 words. So, yeah,
Let's all just take a minute and have a drink.
I was going to say three times the size of that, and a fair chunk of change on top too.
Absolute insanity. Go
on.
It
is. But his influences, he's not a horror writer, but those branching and sort of intersecting character arcs and plot lines that you mentioned, they are a direct result of his influence and other authors of his ilk. You know, a big one for me at the moment is Fonda Lee and the Greenbone saga. Your Patrick Rothfuses. You know, I don't think Patrick has multiple character points, but there's something to me just deeply satisfying about interweaving character arcs, interweaving plot lines that eventually coalesce into an explosive ending. Brandon Sanderson's fans call it the Sanderlanche, when every single plot point that he's started, you know, at various points throughout the book, they all have a tendency to pay off within 1 or 2 chapters, and it's quite overwhelming, but in a really visceral and attractive way. And I wouldn't say that I was going for something quite as overwhelming as a Sanderlanche, but I just think purely by osmosis, my plot points sort of wrap up that way, in an ending that I was quite pleased with, because throughout the process, endings are difficult, and throughout the process, you're never quite sure whether everything you are setting up and you think is going to make for a satisfying ending is going to land properly. And when the individual points start to land, and you start to see those interesting synergies and interesting connections that you can forge between 2 characters, for example, when you see how they can play out in the grander picture that is your book's ending, there's very little that I find more satisfying, and it's something that I strive for in my writing now. It's addictive, is how I'll put it.
And a bit of more of a me kind of geeky question before we get a bit more into the contents of the book. When you're coming up with your story, are you an outliner or are you a pantser? Whereabouts on the kind of spectrum do you place yourself in terms of how deeply you plan? How do you know where your characters are going?
You want the really boring answer, don't you?
Hell yeah!
It's the boring answer is I'm a bit of both.
Okay.
So, like I said, I don't put pen to paper for quite some time. I do a lot of outlining, and when I say a lot of outlining, I'm talking about so for this most recent project, I did about a month before actually putting pen to paper and starting the chapter.
Percolation.
Now, there's so much of this story that I'm pantsing. There's so much of it that I am just going to discover in the writing. I have a very loose outline of story. I've got an idea of the characters that I want, and really in this one, the world that I'm creating for it is going to need an awful lot of detail, planned out, systems of governance, not to give too much away, but certain magic systems, things that will need proper time, effort, and planning that I haven't gotten to yet. So the outlining, while it was, quite a lot of work, it's by no means comprehensive. I think throughout the various drafts that I'm going to be doing, there will be periods of writing followed by periods of outlining in different areas. And then draft by draft, I think I'm going to be outlining right up until the very end. In some ways. So it really is a combination of both. I wish I could say that I'm one of these that's like, I outlined every single meticulous thing about the world and characters and plot, and then they all just fell out of my pen and onto the page, and it was one draft and there wasn't a single spelling error because I planned every word and how I spell it.
No one.
But exactly. But at the same time, like I said, I'm not one of these that can just sit down and go, time to write, and the world will just come to me.
Yeah.
It won't happen without a bit of planning for me.
Yeah. I find like when I come to sort of conclusions in characters, I normally get to a point where I have a plot point that I'm like, this needs resolving in some way. And then I don't know how it happens, but I end up going, oh, what about that character that I did like 12 chapters back who was there for a bit and disappeared? He can come back in and be like a scoop into that. And like those weaves just kind of like come as I go. Because I know the main arc, and then the rest is kind of like pantsed along the way and thing it together. So yeah, bit of magic for all different people.
I think you brought up another just super satisfying element of the process there is that, rather than introducing, I need someone to do this thing.
Yeah.
Let's bring in a new character. No, jump back into the rest of the story and go, this character here hasn't done enough. If I can tell a story with one guy in a room and that needs 20 people, and then I can just put them all into him.
Yeah.
Then that'd be perfect. That might be an exaggeration, but you get my drift. If you can distill a whole cast of characters with names to remember into just a handful, then I think you've done really well there. And that's that's not a universal. Look at George Martin, who sort of I think the famous anecdote, he's got a million characters, and the famous anecdote of him is he was told time and again, you can't have characters with similar sounding names. And of course, his reaction is, oh, can't I? Well, let me introduce you to let me introduce you to Aegon and Daemon and Aerys and
Tyrion and Tywin and
Tyrion. People within the same family, and there's some people within the same family that have the same name. Bran, for example, there's about 50 Brans. In Game of Thrones. So no, it's not a universal rule, but God, I don't know how he can't resist it. How he can't resist just like packing more character into one character.
Yeah. And also for me, it's like when I introduce a character, and as a reader, when I'm introduced to a character, there's kind of an emotional investment that comes with that. And I'm consciously trying to remember that character's name. So if you then add more characters, it pulls me out slightly. Whereas if they can be like, oh, remember that guy? I'm like, yeah, I do. I had forgotten, but now I get it. And it ties in.
And we've all, read a story, been asked to remember a guy or recall a guy, recall a character, and say, "Oh, do you remember this character?" And you're like, "No, not even a little bit." And then it's maybe 5-6 pages, a chapter down down the road where it mentions back to one of their previous actions, and you go, "Oh, right,
that one,
them."
Yeah.
No, I try quite desperately to make the few characters that I introduce memorable in some way, even if it's I don't know if you picked up on this in Ignis Sacer, but I've even used dirty tricks like rhyming names.
No, I didn't.
There's an ale merchant, whose name is Mile, and it's one of those where you think, Mile the ale merchant, it's close enough that you might go that it might just trigger something in your brain and go, oh, okay, right, yes,
smart.
It's cheap. It's cheap, is what it is, Dan.
I don't know that it's cheap. I think there's a cleverness to it in the sense of the whole point of a writer is to give a reader a seamless experience in which they can detach from the real world. And so if you have those mechanisms, like maybe they're cheap, but if they're used smartly, I don't think they are. But before we kind of dive any deeper or turn that knob any writer, what can you tell us about this book? And feel free to reserve some if you want to, be all mysterious, or feel free to throw as much. How much are you happy to tell? And also, apologies, I've been saying Ignis Sacer wrong since you first gave me the book, so I now know how to say it, and thank you.
I'm 75% sure I'm saying Ignis Sacer wrong, so don't worry about it, mate.
We'll go with Sacer for the rest of this. But what is the book about? What can you tell us about Ignis?
So it's the story of two characters, Estienne and Anne. Estienne is a surgeon in medieval France who is helping to treat an outbreak of a disease called holy fire. Anne wants to be this surgeon's understudy. Now, surgery during this time period is considered a bit of a barbaric act. You're cutting up people's bodies. It's considered to be unchristian. So he's really Estienne is really struggling to find support from his local monastery to continue in this. And he sort of had this carrot dangled in front of him his entire life. He works with a brotherhood of laymen who help treat people who are suffering from this disease. And the abbots of the local monastery has basically told Estienne and his brothers, look, we will make you a monastic order if you are able to prove yourselves, which I'd hope people, might find quite relatable. It's the idea of your boss telling you, you can have that promotion if you apply yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the very vague idea of, yeah, exactly.
But what does that mean?
And that's the point. So, these laymen, this brotherhood, labors they labor tirelessly in pursuit of treating this disease and hopefully becoming a monastic order so that they can spread their methods of treatment, including Estienne and his surgery, spreading that treatment to the rest of France and the rest of the world, to anywhere affected by this disease. But of course, they're sort of stuck in this limbo. And Anne, just the only thing she's ever wanted is to become a surgeon herself. She respects Estienne and she respects his work. And he's forbidden from taking on not just an apprentice, but a female apprentice would be the utmost impropriety.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't be allowed. So it's their story, and it's, I guess, on Estienne's side, it's what happens when the carrot that's dangled in front of you for so long is suddenly snatched away. And for Anne, I think it's something a bit more tragic. It's the idea of you've never had really that carrot dangled. It's never been a prospect that you'd be able to grab it. But she's given that hope for one brief moment. And is it more cruel to have the hope snatched away then than if you've been pursuing it your entire life? So it explores those two and their relationship. And yeah, that's what I'd say it's about.
Yeah. I can't help but think about the similarities as well between Anne and just the idea of fear in a writer. Like, a lot of the thing that stops writers from writing is that fear that all this squirreled away in the head of, like, I want to be an author, but for years, but they don't tell anyone. The fear is you'll put out a book and it'll be met with crickets, or it'll be met with like terrible rejection, like that kind of like dwindling, just like all my hopes on the land, it's gone, like everything that I kind of stood for. So like definitely as someone who's read your book, those themes are strong and they carry through. And you have they go on somewhat of a journey with a merry band of characters, and there was a lot that, I'm not someone who knows medieval history. You've alluded and mentioned the fact that you have obviously had to do quite a bit of research for this book, because it's one of the things I just strictly avoid in all of my writing is like anything that could be mildly historical, because I know that if I get like one fact out of line, I'm going to be annoyed. Like, I just like pretending like in my own little world. But obviously, like, that was a challenge you had to tackle, which, as far as I'm aware, didn't go so much into your other books. So what was your approach in, examining history and choosing what aspects of history lended themselves to the story that you wanted to tell?
Yeah, so yes, you're right. A lot of research went into this one, and my approach really was read.
I love. We'll just pause there just purely for a second, because I was talking to someone about this the other day. Like, no matter how much writing advice you read, no matter how many podcasts you listen to, two things stand out above all else, and they are the simplest things ever, and they should be the answer to everything, and we complicate it with all of these other things. If you want to write, write. If you want to get
Yes.
better, read. Like, that's it. It's just that simple. But then obviously it's how you apply that. So I'm going to shut up for a second. Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
My little tirade.
I'm going to struggle to remember some of the names of the books here, but I basically read a lot around the period. The largest book I read, my book is set in the 13th century. This book it sort of revolves primarily around the 14th, but when you're looking back that far, there's a lot of similarities. You just have to be careful in ensuring that technologies that were developed in the sort of late 13th, early 14th century would still be there at your given time frame. So I'm going to apologize to the authors here because I won't remember any of them. Quite a large book on the 14th century was called A Distant Mirror.
If you send me over the links, we can make sure they're in the show notes for people to.
Yeah, certainly, that would be great. So A Distant Mirror really just delves into the minutiae of not just the sort of royalty and the monarchy of the time, which is something that my book has absolutely no desire to engage in. I'd never wanted to write about kings and conquest and whatnot. Never. It was very much what I'd call sort of boots on the ground peasantry. But A Distant Mirror deals very much in the peasantry of the time. There's a book called The Last Duel, which was turned into a film by Ridley Scott not so long ago. Very good film. But I have one character in my book who is a knight. That's about as high ranking in the social status as you can get. And I needed to learn a little bit about knights. And I knew that this book, The Last Duel, would have some really interesting stuff in it, which it did. One more that I guess I can bring up was a really interesting book called The Bright Ages. I was very aware that I was getting quite a one-sided look at the Middle Ages based on a lot of my preconceptions and a lot of other preconceptions. When you hear about the Dark Ages, you immediately think overbearing religious doctrine, and or at least I do, overbearing religious doctrine and an almost complete lack of technological progress for many, many centuries of just feudalism and misery.
Yeah,
basically. And I picked up this book, The Bright Ages, as a counterpoint to that. They approached with an eye to saying, no, it wasn't all doom and gloom. There was technological progress. There was, society did advance in some ways. Sure, it was a period of slow advancement. It was, but humanity wasn't at a complete standstill. So that gave a nice counterpoint. And between those and a lot of other reading that I'm not going to be remembering the names of, gave me a really good view of the period.
Yeah. I remember as well, you put a lot of these books in the back of your book, sort of mentioning them as well. So for people who want to know more, read through the book. Look on the back pages. It's there as well.
Yeah.
With balancing a story that is arguably epic in its size, epic in some of the things that happen, there's some really nice touches. Again, like, won't go too much into the magic systems, but there's a real nice balancing there of sort of the, for want of a better word, it's not supernatural, of the magic sort of elements alongside arguably a bit supernatural. Balancing that with some of those darker elements. What were your kind of thoughts when you went into writing those darker scenes, sort of, because it's very easy, I know, as someone who writes dark stuff, to go into depths of depravity, especially in those first drafts, and just write horrendous stuff. And obviously there's an element in your story that carries forward hope from the beginning to the end. So how do you balance sort of the dark around that thread line of hope?
So I may have mentioned this to you before, but reflecting on my book, this is going to make me sound dreadful, but I wanted more depravity.
Yes.
I'm really happy with how it turned out, because at the end of the day, every scene that I wrote worked to serve the story.
Yes.
And I think the approach that I took was to write the levels of horror and disgust and distress and depravity to the level, to the point where they'd serve the story and not push it any further. And I think when I eventually dip my pen back into the horror pot, I'm going to try and push that stuff a bit further and really terrify, if possible. But for this story, yeah, I think it was primarily with the goal of balancing. That idea of hope always had to be there throughout the story, and I didn't want to sully it with anything too hopeless. I didn't want to crush my characters to the point where I didn't think that they could recover, or at least recover in a way that might be satisfying.
Yeah.
Not to suggest that all characters do recover, not to suggest that, all characters find their happy ending, not to suggest that anyone does. But
everyone dies.
yeah. I rogue one a lot of them. So, but no, it's that balance of hope, and I think if I was trying to go for an ending, sort of like, I don't know, just pulling a name out of the bag, 7, an ending of just absolute hopelessness and dread, then perhaps some of my scenes, my more horror focused scenes, could have been allowed to have been a bit more upsetting. And again, not to say that they're not entirely, they're not pleasant.
Yeah.
But I very much look forward to exploring a story where I can push it a bit further.
I will say, and you'll likely know immediately where I'm going with this because you wrote the story, one particular scene that is with a man. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
That I very much enjoyed. And also, I think I've only just gotten onto the fact, when the Brandon Sanderson's endings all come towards, is that like Avalanche, but Sanderlanche?
Correct.
I've only just tweaked that. That's what you meant. But in that case, then I will say that this book, I don't know how Brandon Sanderson does it. I'm yet to read one. I have Mistborn to read. I realised I was waiting on the mic.
Fantastic place to start.
Yeah. But there was definitely a rolling downhill towards the end. There was definitely kind of I remember those chapters going very quickly in a good way. Lots happening, lots of resolutions and things. So there's definitely some of that in it. And I'm aware that we're coming close to time, but I do want to get in as well. There's a lot of references and experiences with substances in this book, is all I say, because I don't know how far you want to take that, but in terms of a particular character's fondness for a particular substance.
Yeah.
What was the research for that within legal boundaries?
So
because they're fun scenes to read.
So get a VPN, guys. That's my advice if you want to start researching the dodgier side of the internet.
Yeah.
This podcast, coincidentally, is brought to you by
shrooms. It's not shrooms.
No. So I mean, yeah. To be fair, having a VPN was part of it, but I can delve a bit into the sort of inception of the book because it is related.
Yeah.
So one of my big horror influences, as you'll know, is the director Robert Eggers, responsible for The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and most recently Nosferatu, the remake. Now, I was going down a rabbit hole of it was around the time The Lighthouse released a few years ago now. And I was just going back and I watched Mark Commode's review of The Witch. And he described the Witch as having this idea of a shared hallucination. And he said, it feels like all the characters are suffering a bout of ergotism. And, it's Mark Commode and Mayo, Simon Mayo. Simon Mayo sort of leaned across the table and said, "A bout of what?" He said, ergotism, the fungus that grows on rye grain and makes made people go mad in the Dark Ages. And I was listening to this and I thought, I'd never heard of that.
Yeah.
That's very odd. So I started looking into ergotism, and I won't go into too much about it, but the more I read up on it, and I advise everyone to read up on it after they've read my book, obviously. But the more I looked into it, the more sort of my heart sank, and I thought, well, I want to write a story about this, but just from reading all this cool stuff, it's deadly obvious that someone's written this book before. And I looked, and I looked, and I think it's a result of this being a 13th century plague, or largely 13th century plague, sort of 10th to 13th, and the Black Death arriving in the 14th century. I think it's the proximity of the two plagues and just the devastation of the Black Death that means that there are so many stories based on that plague, and so few, or next to none, based on this one. So I thought, this is amazing. This weird esoteric plague that I'd never heard of, and basically every single person I've spoken to about it had never heard of it. And I thought, well, a story needs to be written. So a lot of my research went into ergotism, and then it became very clear, like, right, I'm going to have to swat up on the 13th century.
Yeah.
But like I said before, not having any interest in depicting the monarchy, I think really helped. Because when you're talking about that era, it's a lot of, that's the stuff you've got to get right.
Yeah. Because
that's the stuff that people know about. The day-to-day stuff, the peasantry, you've got to get their technology right. Things like farming and what foods they didn't have. One such example, no one in my book eats potatoes because potatoes didn't exist. And that's one thing that you will have to get right in these things. Yeah. You think about medieval stories, and you for whatever reason, I think of like, people must have eaten tons of potatoes back then. But
that was an American discovery, wasn't it? It was Christopher Columbus.
I think so, yeah. And I think it might be as late as the 15th century.
Yeah. Pretty sure it's like 1600s.
Yeah.
Wait,
so
is that how the math works? No.
Not quite. But it's, it's weird to say that it's a relatively modern invention. So it's finding stuff like that. And on a more granular and boring level, things like tracking people's journeys throughout France. I want my characters to get from one real world location to another in a certain number of days. How are they going to get there? You look at it on Google Maps, and of course, these roads didn't exist. So you have to look at the roads that did exist. And in one particular instance, there's a bridge crossing. It's not a particularly significant bridge crossing in the book. You just cross my characters just cross a bridge. And I actually moved the entire timeline of my story a few years across from, I think I originally had it planned as being set in 1202, and I moved it to 1217 because this one bridge that I really wanted to use had not been constructed until 1216.
Oh, that level of detail.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's important, because even if people aren't looking at your book and going, now hang about, was that bridge there in 1216? I think just the fact that you've done that I think it bleeds through. I think that the realism, even though it's not overt, I think it's there sort of subliminally, and it will leach through, and the reader will sort of take it on board, and I think they'll find that trust in you. Whereas if you get the date of the bridge wrong, or someone chows down on a potato when they weren't supposed to, it's probably not going to derail your story entirely, but maybe a little bit of that trust will be lost. And I really hope, I don't know of any historians that have read the book, but I really hope that there's not too much in there where they think, I don't know about this. I think back to, I can't remember the name of the story, and I'm not going to call them out. That would be quite rude. But it was a medieval thing. I think it was something like 12th century. And first few pages, something happens to a character, and the phrase that was used was, it knocked them for six.
Ooh.
And I just immediately thought, cricket wasn't around in this
There
time.
you go. Yeah.
So how could it knock you for six?
Mhm.
And I'm sorry to say that for the rest of the book, I couldn't think of anything else.
Unconvinced.
And being hyper aware of that, I really didn't want to have a knock you for six moment in my book.
Yeah. So for me, your book, I really, really enjoyed, as I've said multiple times. Some of the things I liked about your book specifically, I have read a lot of novella length books recently, specifically in horror, and there seems to be a bit of a trend towards shorter books. And for me, it's been a while since I've read a longer book with a lot more substance, a lot more care to detail like that. So it was nice and refreshing because I used to read a lot of bigger fantasy, and having that kind of feel, but with those darker tones, was really, really nice for me to experience. In terms of like influences as someone from my library of things that I've read, for people who like Dan Simmons' The Terror, for people who like Ali Wilkes' Where the Dead Wait, for people who like Alma Katsu's The Hunger, there's lots of those historical elements. It's got that very lush depthness with that kind of supernatural tinge. So I particularly enjoyed that. Like, I want to do a pat on the back over podcasts. Like, it's like, I always like it when people that I know have written books, and normally that's kind of like authors who I've met in the last 10 years, but it's always really, really nice for me when I see like friends writing stuff, and like, you know, I'm always honored when people share that with me and give me a chance to look at that work as well and give my feedback. But is there anything else that you want to add about your story, about the book, anything you want to tell the readers, particularly before we get into the quick fire round, which is, this is the first podcast I'm bringing this back in about 3 years. I'm very excited.
I'm excited too, and thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. I guess I don't want to delve any more into the story, but I will. I mean, I love books and I love films, and I think if I could you've thrown a few sort of book comparisons, and if I talk a bit about what's inspired me in the film sort of sphere,
Hell yeah.
I would put this book to people who love. I think it's a really wanky phrase, but prestige horror. I mentioned that I like Robert Eggers. It's just the word that's been thrown around for it.
Yeah. Elevated horror, I think, is another like term for it as
Elevated
well. Yeah,
horror,
yeah.
again,
I know what
just
you
as
mean.
wanky.
Like
But
Jordan Peele.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, Jordan Peele, a good example, but his is a bit more tongue in cheek.
Mhm.
Big fan of Robert Eggers. Similar vein, very big fan of Ari Aster. Anyone who enjoyed Hereditary and Midsummer especially, I think you'll
Oh,
get
yeah.
a lot of those vibes.
Mm.
Alex Garland's Annihilation has some pretty direct influences. Obviously, it's not a period piece, but some of that sort of horror DNA, pun intended in that film's case, has really made its way into my book. And that film that I mentioned, Black Death, if you enjoyed this one, if you enjoyed the book, absolutely give it a watch. You'll find a lot of you won't find so many similarities, but the period, certainly you'll find a lot there. Yeah.
Beautiful. And a final question I didn't want to throw in before we get to quick fire round. What's next for JD Parker?
What's
You've
next?
kind of touched on you're writing something new. I know,
Yeah.
as a friend, you're not saying much about it, which is fine.
I will reveal, podcast exclusive here. I
Hey!
will reveal that it is a fantasy. It's not a horror, though I did originally set out to write a horror. I wanted to write a horror trilogy. I spent a lot of time thinking about what scared me the most. This is going back to my desire to write some more sort of terrifying scenes. And I put a lot of thought into personally what scares me, because I do genuinely think that a lot of modern horror, the stuff that's really succeeded, isn't falling back on familiar monster tropes. It's taking a real deep dive into the human psyche and picking out elements that people almost don't like to talk about. They're that terrifying. One thing that I can point to quite clearly. There's a Black Mirror episode in which there's it's Wyatt Russell who stars in it, and the whole I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the conceit of the horror in the episode is dementia and losing
Ooh.
memory. Genuinely taboo, genuinely terrifying stuff. You know, people are scared of spiders. People are scared of wolves. So what? This is, you know, we've explored that ground, you know, so many times. But the real stuff that people don't want to talk about, if you confront them with that, I think that's terrifying. So I started with this idea of looking for what really scares me in myself. I found it. I then found stories based on that thing that scares me. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, it scares me, but I don't have to. It's not taking a horror shape in my mind.
Yeah.
It started taking a fantasy shape.
Mm.
So it's a different way to explore this horror, and hopefully a sort of more interesting and nuanced way than turning it into a monster to scare people.
Yeah.
It's perhaps hoping to more make a discussion about it than it is just spook you. So yeah, that's about as much as I'm willing to share.
Okay, and then that's as much as we're willing to take. Awesome,
Oh,
right?
that's a shame. That's a shame. I'd
'Cause there was
really
so
hope that
much more.
people were just like begging for more, but they're like, no, that's
No, we
as
respect
much
your
as I'll have.
boundaries.
Oh, okay, nice, good save. Good
Hey,
save.
pulled it back. As I said, we're going to jump into a quick fire round, which used to be in a lot of the podcasts I record. I'm very excited to be bringing this back for the writer's chair. So I've got 10 questions. I'm going to throw them at you relatively quickly. Answer them as quick as you can, whatever pops into your head. Are you ready to go?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Wonderful. Let us begin. Number 1, gin or whiskey?
Whiskey.
Would you rather be cursed or haunted?
God, they're so similar. I was about to say cursed because there's more nuance to curses, but you could be haunted by any number of ghosts, and they could be nuanced. I'm going to say haunted because I reckon that scares the shit out of me, but I reckon I could ghostbust a ghost.
Intriguing.
I'd track down a professional ghostbuster and get them to help me, and I think it would be pretty cool to do so. I think breaking a curse is a bit more boring. So haunted. That wasn't very quick. That wasn't very quick fire. Haunted.
It never is. It never is. There's lots of talismans and rituals in getting rid of a curse.
Yeah.
What's your go-to comfort food after writing something grim?
Oh, I don't know if I've ever reached for something to eat after a grim writing session. So, boring answer. It's going to be pizza and ice cream. We'll go specifics. We'll go Ben and Jerry's half-baked ice cream, and
On
for the
top of pizza,
something with goat's cheese.
Ooh. Do you believe in divine punishment?
I don't believe in divine anything.
What was your last Halloween costume?
I've not done Halloween, so it's probably back in uni, you know. So, oh God, maybe El Nombre?
I wanted to... I'm holding myself back now.
The real ones will know. The real ones will know.
The real ones will know. What's more stressful, digital forensics or medieval surgery?
Medieval surgery. Not that I've ever done it myself. I promise. I say this a lot. In digital forensics, you see some. In my role specifically, you see some pretty dreadful stuff. But that is the extent of it. You see it.
Yeah.
The rest of your senses are not engaged.
Yeah.
Medieval surgery, very different.
Who's your favourite horror movie villain of all time?
Favourite horror movie villain? Oh, you mentioned Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
I don't even know if this villain has a name. Lupita Nyong'o's character in Us. It's the scariest performance I've seen in my life.
I've literally got it on Blu-ray behind me.
I mean, she is haunting. I'm going to change my answer to cursed, because if I'm haunted, there's a chance I'll be haunted by her, and I'm not taking it. I'm not having it. Sorry.
We've come full circle. What's one smell that instantly unsettles you?
Oh, your mum. Next, please. No, a smell that instantly unsettles me. Sorry.
I love it.
We're professionals.
No, we're not. I never pretended to be.
Smoke when you don't know where it's coming from.
Good answer. What's the most medieval thing about you besides your book?
The most medieval thing about me. Oh, my hygiene.
What one book would
you know, I'm going to say my diet. I'm vegetarian. I eat a lot of vegetables. However, I do eat potatoes, and we've sort of established that's not very medieval.
No.
So yeah,
we'll take it. What one book would you recommend above all others, including your own?
You mentioned it earlier. Care to guess?
When Winter Comes by Daniel Willcocks.
Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. I will point out you didn't mention that one earlier.
Is it The Terror?
It's The Terror by Dan Simmons. You won't be surprised to know that your listeners won't be surprised to know it's a long one. It's very long, and it's a horror book. So I guess it's partly responsible for the length of my book. It's much longer than my book, but I guess the idea was there in my head, like, oh, I can write horror and I can make it long. And it's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's realistic. It's moody. It's lonely. It's lonely in a lot of ways. And some of the depictions of real illnesses and real problems are, again, haunting. Just horrible stuff. But so much fun to read.
I've got a recommendation for you when we come off air that I'll come back to. No, wait, I'll share it now just because it's fantastic.
I was going to say, what about the listeners, Dan? What about your flow?
No, I read Tananarive Dew's The Reformatory last year, which is a examination of ghosts and penitentiary treatment for black children in the 1940s, I believe it's set. And it is a marvellous book, very, very good. I think it was I can't remember if it won an award last year. It won a few different awards, but I'm pretty sure it was nominated for Stoker as well. But that's probably the biggest book I've read outside of yours recently that was fantastic. So Tananarive Dew's The Reformatory, very, very good.
Wonderful, thank you.
Bonus question: where can my listeners find out all about yourself and everything that you're working on?
They can find it at my website, which is wakenwinslow.com. You can find my book, Ignis Sacer, on Amazon. That is Ignis Sacer. I get that we've said it so many times in so many different ways. People are just, how do I spell it?
Ignis Sacer.
Yeah. Ignis Sacer is available now. wakeandwinslow.com. You'll find a little bit about me and links to the book. You can also follow me on Instagram, where I currently have somewhere in the region of about 3 posts. Ooh. So hours and hours of entertainment there.
Feast your eyes.
I know. Yeah. I know.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes so people can find that easily. And that is a wrap from us. So thank you so much, Jonny, for joining us this week on the Writer's Chair podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. It's been really fun.
No worries. And an especially big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Before you dash off, if you're craving deeper conversation, writing advice, or just fancy hanging out with fellow readers and storytellers, come join the Devil's Rock community on Discord. I'm on a mission to build the largest online space for fans of horror and dark fiction, a home where writers and readers connect, create, and thrive together. It's free, open to all, and always crackling with inspiration. If you're ready to pull up a virtual chair, head on over to devilsrockbooks.com/podcast for the invite link. And until next time, my friend, write bravely and dream dark.